General questions. Questions orales. The honourable member for Thornhill.
Less, but then he spent $35 billion more in the last fiscal update alone. He promised to lower the debt. Instead, the deficit's doubled from just 1 year ago, and he promised fiscal brilliance. But the not even so conservative Globe and Mail calls that an inversion of reality. Once an expensive Liberal, always an expensive Liberal. This year, Canadian families will write a check for $3,400 just to cover the interest on the Liberal debt. Why won't the Prime Minister stop forcing Canadians to pay the credit card bill and just allow them to get by?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's new government is committed to build a strong, resilient and independent economy. Despite what we hear opposite, our economy is strong. The IMF projects our economy to be one of the most resilient, fastest growing in the G7. We're going to continue to build the economy. A spring economic update invests $6 billion in the trades. It invests in the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Mr. Speaker, on this side, we are continuing to build a strong economy. That side can continue with the rhymes and rhetoric. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Debt fund. The Prime Minister actually told Canadians that he was the guy that you hired in a crisis and then spent double what the last guy spent. Just 5 years from now, the Liberal credit card bill will reach $1 trillion. All that spending has brought us the highest grocery prices, the worst housing prices, and a $2 a litre gasoline while everybody falls behind. The crisis guy is racking up more debt and promising somehow it's going to be different this time. When are they finally going to stop the credit card craziness and so Canadians can afford to live?
The Honourable Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation.
Speaking of credit, we have the best credit rating in the world. Wages have grown twice as fast as inflation. What would this or the opposition cut? What would they cut? For example, would they cut support for our workers? Just today, Mr. Speaker, we have invested $1 billion to support the steel, the aluminum, the copper industries hit by a trade war that they deny, and another $500 million for good jobs like at Beaurock where they're building with steel. Would these guys cut support for those industries? Ask them, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Gateway.
Mr. Speaker, despite the illusions, with this Prime Minister, it's more cost, more blocking our resources, more of the same, because he's just another Liberal. This Prime Minister said a pipeline was more probable than possible, but there's no proponent, there's no start date, no completion date, no route. There's no plan. If the Prime Minister wants Canadians to believe he's not just another Liberal, will the government tell us on what date will construction start on this new pipeline? Just a date, please.
L'honorable ministre de l'Industrie.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague in charge of natural resources will be able to also answer that question. What I can add to that is that the Conservatives in all their questions always forget something that all Canadians know, which is we're in a trade war. And a lot of workers their jobs are at stake, and that is exactly why today we announced $1 billion through the BDC to help our steel, aluminum, and copper workers, and that's also why we announced $500 million to support workers across the country. We've been there since the beginning of the trade war, and we'll continue to be there.
The honourable member for Edmonton Gateway.
It's not the Americans that are blocking a pipeline to the West Coast. It's this government. The biggest barriers that we have facing in the industry is the Liberal government. This Prime Minister has not reversed a single Liberal anti-development law, reduced a single tax on our resource industries, or delivered a single shovel in the ground on a new project from his major projects office. It's more of the same because it's just another Liberal. They said that they would move at unimaginable speeds. So, on what date will construction start on the new pipeline? Just the date, please.
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, if instead of working on their social media clips, they actually spent some time talking to proponents, they would understand that we approved the Taylor to Gordondale pipeline and Pembina is building a pipeline. They would understand Enbridge approved the Sunrise pipeline. It is building a pipeline. And if they actually talk talk to the government of Alberta, they would understand Alberta is coming forward with a proposal by July 1st, Mr. Prime Minister.
L'honorable député de Mégantic-Lérable.
The honorable member for Mégantic-Lérable, Lobinière. 1 with 12 zeros. 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0. $1 trillion. Mr. Speaker, that's the amount that the Liberals have added to the national credit card over 10 years. More zeros means more debt. More debt means more taxes. More taxes means less money in Canadians' pockets. This Prime Minister is just another Liberal. When will he start adding zeros to the national credit card? When will he finally let Canadians just pay the bills? The Honourable Minister of Industry. My colleague does not recognize that we are in a tariff war. We are here for our auto sector, our copper, aluminum, and steel sectors. And in fact, Quebec is very pleased with our announcement this morning of $1 billion for BDC and $500 million for economic development agencies. My colleague has to recognize that we have reduced government operating costs. Meanwhile, we are investing in order to create economic development. Our plan is working. The honourable member for Mégantic-Lérable, Lobinière. Well, I just add another zero to that, this time for the minister's answer. Because when a student piles up the zeros, they fail. This Liberal government is piling up the zeros and Canadians are paying for that failure. Costs are skyrocketing. Everything costs so much. Housing, food, gas. Why? Because the Liberal Prime Minister is printing more debt as if there were no tomorrow. But there is a tomorrow, and our children are going to have to pay the debt and the interest. This Prime Minister is just another costly Liberal. Is he finally going to put an end to his costly budgets on the national credit card? The Honourable Minister. I'd like to give my colleague an A+, for following his leader's instructions and just reading the question he was provided. He likes to make his little jokes. Well, we can give him a math lesson. Canada's growth is the second best in the G7. And we have the best fiscal position in the G7. Those are the facts. Those are the numbers. We have a plan. The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals seem to have finally understood that it's terrible to just forget about our businesses in the tariff war in their economic update. But unfortunately, today's announcement seems to be very off the cuff. It's not going to really help the SMEs that are affected by new American tariffs. These businesses are clear. They don't want more loans. They already have too much debt. What they need is help modernizing, and especially what they need is liquidity to survive. This is a first step, but can the government confirm that there is more to come? The Honourable Minister of Industry. I'd like to thank my colleague for her important question. Indeed, we have announced good news for our businesses this morning, $1.5 billion to help with liquidity and with extremely favorable debt, no interest for the first year, and then very low interest for years 2 and 3. And there's no need to pay the loan back until the end of the term after 3 years. We're doing this because our businesses need help. We are here to help them. We are getting good reactions from the manufacturers and exporters of Quebec and other organizations. We're meeting their needs. The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, we will cooperate with the government on this first step, but let me just quote the Federation of Chambers of Commerce. For businesses that are currently barely able to survive, this is not enough. They need liquidity to keep operating. They don't need more debt or to make investments that won't benefit them until the middle or long term. That's what the Federation says. Mr. Speaker, we need immediate help and we need wage subsidies in order to avoid layoffs. When is the government finally going to do something about this? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just spoke to the leader of the Quebec Federation of Chambers of Commerce. And she said she greatly appreciated what the government is doing here. Of course, there's always more to do, and we will do more. But I think this is good news for companies like PRP that have been affected by the new tariff calculation. Companies like Manac, with thousands of jobs throughout Quebec and the rest of the country, And that's why my colleagues and I have been in solutions mode this morning. The honourable member for Joliette-Manawan. Mr. Speaker, the new American tariff calculation started on April 6th is a catastrophe for Quebec's manufacturing. Desjardins revealed that a quarter of all Quebec exports to the U.S. are being affected. This is a 160% increase and it is affecting our small businesses, but they're not being helped by our government in this announcement. They cannot take on more middle-term debt when they are facing immediate bankruptcy. They need help today. Will our government do something about this? The Honourable Minister for Canada-US Trade, as my colleague just indicated, we just announced further measures this morning to support businesses that are being affected by the unjustified tariffs from the Americans. I have met with a number of these businesses, and my colleague has too. Our ministers, our members are very aware of these difficulties, and that is exactly why we are supporting these industries, and that's why we are there to do more if necessary.
Member for Calgary East.
This Liberal Prime Minister racks up the national credit card because he knows Canadians have to foot the bill. Despite all the Liberal illusions, it's more costs, more taxes, more debt, more on the national credit card, all by the same old costly Liberals. Every time these guys say they're going to change, they end up racking up more on the national credit card, now leaving Canadians with $1 trillion debt bill over the lost Liberal decade. Does the Prime Minister know this is Canadians' money, not his, or does he just not care?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer says Canada's fiscal indicators are good, and the Bank of Canada Governor has said he's encouraged by the federal government's efforts. That's because the Canadian economy is stronger and more resilient than anticipated, 11 billion less of a deficit, inflation within the Bank of Canada's target, the highest foreign direct investment in nearly 2 decades. We still enjoy a AAA credit rating. Wages are growing faster than inflation, and the IMF says Canada's got the strongest fiscal position in the G7. Those things don't happen by accident, Mr. Speaker. They're proof that our plan is working.
And the Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Does this guy want a gold medal for having the second highest deficit in the entire Canadian history outside of COVID? This Prime Minister skips on the bill while Canadians are skipping meals. More than 1 in 10 Canadians now are living in poverty, and the pain's only going to get worse by these guys piling on more and more debt. The Liberals spend like there's no consequences. It's Canadians that have to pay those consequences. When will he stop the reckless spending? Stop the out-of-control deficit so Canadians can afford to live.
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Mr. Speaker, in that member's province alone, the National School Food Program is feeding nearly 60,000 children. And in early learning and childcare spots, Mr. Speaker, families are saving up to $13,700 per child per year, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, we've got the Canada Dental Care Plan in that riding as well, Mr. Speaker, which helps over 155,000 people in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, all across the province that member claims to represent, people are benefiting from Liberal developed programs that are helping with the cost of living and making sure families get ahead.
The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake.
The Prime Minister claims a new pipeline is more probable than possible. Yet there's no proponent, no start date, no completion date, no route, no timeline, no shovels in the ground, nothing. This after promising to move at unimaginable speeds. Despite the illusions, it's clear the Prime Minister is just another Liberal. If he wants Canadians to believe he's anything other than just another Liberal, will he answer this simple question? What is the exact date construction will begin on a new Pacific pipeline? Just the date.
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, if they would stop focusing on their social media clips and focus on what's happening out there, they would see that Pembina Pipeline is building the Taylor to Gordondale pipeline this summer. They would see that Enbridge is building the Sunrise pipeline this summer. And if they talked to the government of Alberta, they would realize the government of Alberta is bringing forward their proposal this summer.
Member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake.
I I'm focused on the people of Fort McMurray Cold Lake. And Mr. Speaker, the problem is this is not yet another Liberal illusion. The biggest barriers that we face in developing Canadian natural resources are imposed on it by the Liberal government here in Ottawa. They haven't repealed a single anti-development law, not one tax cut for the resource sector, not one shovel in the ground through their major projects office. It's the same old story because it's just another Liberal. So the promise to move at unimaginable speeds. So can he just very clearly say, what is the date for this new Pacific pipeline? Just the date, please.
The Honourable Minister.
So here's what is not an illusion, Mr. Speaker. $4 billion going into the Canadian economy this summer. 2,500 new jobs on the Sunrise expansion this summer. $3 billion annually in new GDP from this summer forward. And if they bothered to talk to the Alberta government, they would understand they are bringing their proposal forward this summer for the benefit of the people of Alberta and all of Canada.
Honourable Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Despite his promises, this Liberal Prime Minister is all about more costs, more carbon taxes, and more of the same. He said last May, Canadians will hold us to account by their experience at the grocery store. Everyone knows when fuel prices go up, food costs go up. From Mike Boylo of the Northwest Company, a jug of milk now costs $2 to $5 more because of higher fuel prices. Why is fuel so expensive? Because of high Liberal taxes, including the newly renamed carbon tax. Will Liberals scrap all gas taxes all year, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite's from British Columbia, and what I know people in British Columbia want is the actions that we are taking right now. They're seeing the steps we're taking with the groceries and essentials benefit. They're seeing us remove 10 cents a litre off fuel, and they're seeing our investments in young people and our economy. Mr. Speaker, we're addressing the things that people in BC want.
Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Those empty words won't fill empty stomachs, Minister. Liberals tell you that gas prices are up because world oil prices are at $100 a barrel. But do you know when oil was also at $100 a barrel? The price in 2014, under our Conservative government. The price at the pump then was $1.38 per litre, not $1.99 for gas or $2.29 for diesel like it is today in Fort St. John. Will the Liberal Prime Minister stop the illusion, scrap all gas taxes all year so Canadians can afford to live again?
Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we're aware of the impact of fuel prices. That's why we've brought them down by 10 cents a litre. We are addressing exactly what our member opposite's talking about. We're also delivering the food and essentials groceries and essentials benefit, and we've made the National School Food Program permanent to help families. You know, we're doing the work that's being asked for.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are concerned. The Liberals are on track to add $1 trillion to the national debt since taking office just 11 years ago. And just like our personal credit cards, Canadians know we'll have to pay that bill. This Liberal Prime Minister is not a good steward of our tax dollars. It's an illusion. We have more cost, more taxes, more debt. This Prime Minister is just another Liberal. When will he get serious? When will he end his costly credit card budgeting so Canadians can afford to live?
The Honourable Minister of Emergency Management and Community Resilience.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our plan and our spring economic update is good for Edmonton, but my fellow Edmontonians on the Conservative benches shouldn't just take it from me. Doug Griffiths, President and CEO of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, says our update aligns closely with what Edmonton businesses have been wanting to see from our federal government. I hope every Edmonton MP listens to the people and the organizations we represent and gets on board with our plan to build Canada strong.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are taking advantage of their majority to try to stifle the Currim software scandal. After months of denying all the issues with OAS and all of the cost overruns, the government has added $451 for Currim in its economic update. More cost overruns, even though they're saying there were no cost overruns, to fix problems that they also denied. We'll never know why, because the Liberals are using their majority at committee to stifle the Currim investigation. What are they hiding? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, no one is hiding anything. This is entirely transparent. The procurement process was transparent. The budget is transparent. The budgets were respected. And the Kurum software is helping us make life better for millions of Canadian seniors every month. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, there's been cost overruns on 5 occasions. And the Liberals have only had a majority at committee for 1 week, and they've already managed to shut down an investigation on the Kurum cost overrun, $7 billion. They also shut down a Drivers Inc. investigation. It seems like they prefer to protect dangerous trucking than to protect Quebecers. They also shut down investigations on health, Veterans Affairs, aerospace, and so on. This is just the culture in Ottawa. Secrecy. When will the Prime Minister finally put an end to this? The Honourable Minister of Employment and Families. Mr. Speaker, $1.8 billion have been invested out of a total budget of $4.8 billion to modernize these systems. Modernizing the OAS system was carried out under the projected budget, which shows that the project was rigorously managed. This information was communicated transparently, and it was reviewed by opposition parties and an opposition-chaired committee. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' economic update is just more of the same. More uncontrolled spending, more debt for Canadians. The national debt by 2031 will reach the horrifying level of $1.63 trillion. That's $1,630 billion of Liberal debt. The Prime Minister says that he's a responsible fiscal manager, but he's just another costly Liberal. So will the Prime Minister finally do something about the Liberal credit card? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. To the Minister of Housing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that on the other side, they seem to struggle with facts, especially when they have to do any amount of math. But let me help them. We reduced the deficit by $11 billion. We are the second strongest economy in the G7. And we are attracting more investment than we have for 2 decades. Why? Well, while the Conservatives were wearing themselves out, repeating the same talking points day after day, we are adapting to a changing world, and we are building a strong Canada for all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, in Beauce, 1 + 1 is 2, not -10, as like if the Liberals were doing the math. And this kind of spending is having devastating consequences for Canadians. More taxes, more Liberal inflation, more interest. That interest will be $3,400 per family per year. While the Liberals pile up the deficits, the costs of all sorts of essential things like housing and gas are just going up. And once again, people in Beauce are paying the price for this disastrous mismanagement. Again, I'm asking, is there any limit to Liberal spending? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have been very clear about their austerity program, but I would still like to know exactly what programs they wish to cut. Do they want to cut our agreement with Quebec, $1 billion for infrastructure? Do they want to cut the investments in the Port of Montreal or the Contrecoeur port? Or do they want to cut the money that we just announced to help people who are in a vulnerable situation? I hope we can get answers. We've been waiting for quite a while. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Richmond North Basca. Mr. Speaker, we've had 11 years of this Liberal government, and what's the result? More taxes, more debt, more spending on the national credit card, and more regulations. A chief economist at the National Bank has told us that Ottawa has now added 320,000 new regulations to Canadian businesses. 320,000. And this is at a time when the U.S. is deregulating. And what's the result? Layoffs and plant closures. When will the Prime Minister finally understand that with more regulation, there are more costs for businesses, and once again, Canadians are paying the price? The Honourable Secretary of State, Nature. We are taking action. Mr. Speaker, we are taking action to simplify government operations and also to simplify the relationship between Quebec City and Ottawa. To reduce red tape, we are taking action, we are going to do that, and we are also working hard on issues that affect people every day. The grocery benefit, the various programs we have for children and seniors. We're doing all this to support Canadians during a difficult time. We're doing that, and we hope that our colleagues will cooperate.
The member for Richemont-Tabasca. Mr. Speaker, it's a very sad state of affairs. Since January, factory closures have been rising. On top of losing their jobs, Canadians are paying the Liberals' credit card bills. There's a company called Savoura. It pays $2.5 million a year in carbon tax and in fines for environmental non-compliance. Surtaxes for growing tomatoes, surtaxes that make it difficult to compete with tomatoes from Mexico that have traveled across the continent. Instead of creating yet another form of corporate band-aid, why not fix the regulations and give our businesses some real breathing room? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Quebec's businesses and Canada's businesses are struggling. What causes these difficulties, though? The tariff war. The unjustified, unfair, counterproductive tariffs that the United States is imposing on Canadian businesses. That's why we need to help businesses. That's why we're supporting businesses, and we're spending what needs to be spent to keep businesses afloat, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Lafleur. Mr. Speaker, don't be fooled. With this Liberal Prime Minister, what we have is more spending, more taxes, more debt, and more on the national credit card. It's always the same old story. He's just another costly Liberal. The Liberal debt has risen to $1,475 billion. Meanwhile, according to the Journal de Montréal, 1 in 3 Quebecers is going into debt just to be able to eat. When will the Prime Minister take the situation seriously and stop his credit card budgets? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the colleague is correct about the debt amount, but it's 41% from the private sector. It's one of the most manageable debt levels in the G7. But here's my question to my colleague. What would he cut? What programs would his party cut? Would they cut old age security? Would they cut the Canada Child Benefit? That's $8 billion, the Canada Child Benefit. So what would they cut? Please tell us. The member should speak through the chair.
For Sackville, Bedford, Preston. No? Okay. The honourable member for... l'honorable député.
The honourable member for Orleans. Mr. Speaker, Canada's mission in Afghanistan was the most important military deployment in Canada since the Second World War. From 2001 to 2014, over 40,000 Canadians served with great courage and sacrifice. We honor them. We honor the memory of the 158 military personnel and civilians who passed.
Minister of Veterans Affairs explained why today's groundbreaking ceremony for the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan is important, and what she hoped this day will mean to CAF members, veterans, families, and Canadians.
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I thank all of my colleagues that were able to join us a short time ago for today's groundbreaking ceremony at the site of the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan. This is a long overdue step in ensuring that the service and sacrifice of Canadians, notably the 158 Canadian Armed Forces members and the 7 civilians who gave their lives, are remembered. This monument will serve as a place of solemn reflection, remembrance, and learning for generations to come. A place where Canadians can better understand the contributions made in pursuit of peace, security, and human dignity. For all Canadians, this day is an opportunity to come together in gratitude, to honor those who have served, and to reaffirm.
The Honourable The honourable member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, it's a new week in Ottawa, but the Prime Minister is on international travel back in Europe again. But we already have a free trade deal with Europe. But there is one thing our allies have been asking us for, and that is Canadian liquefied natural gas. Now, one would go to Europe to make a big announcement. So will the minister confirm that the Prime Minister is indeed in Europe to announce on what date our allies can accept?
You know, I don't think the member is alluding to a specific time when the Prime Minister would be might be leaving for Europe, but we have to be careful not to. We have to be careful. I don't think this. This is really trying to do indirectly what we're not supposed to do directly. But I'll see if anyone wants to take that question. Apparently not. The honourable member. The honourable second question. The honourable member for Simcoe North.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what is the purpose of all the travel and the meetings and the MOUs if there's nothing tangible to show for it? The Europeans have repeatedly asked for Canadian liquefied natural gas. Now, they probably would like to invest in a port or a pipeline to get Canadian energy to Europe. We don't need speeches, we don't need MOUs, we don't need summits, and we don't need a government-run hedge fund. We need investable projects to get Canada's energy to the world.
That's right.
So will the minister announce on which date Canadian LNG will make it to the shores of Europe?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the member opposite is we have European governments contracting with LNG facilities today to buy LNG from Canada. And we just saw Shell, a European company, invest $20 billion into Canada because they want to build more LNG here. So maybe they could read the papers.
The honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, behind all the talk, this Prime Minister is just another Liberal. He's more expensive, more anti-resource, more misleading. He is well aware that Canada already has free trade agreements with Europe. Those are all in place. What we need is for him and his government to just get out of the way and stop blocking our biggest export. He said we would build at speeds never seen before, but so far, our biggest exports under this government are speeches, handshakes, and photo ops. So does the Prime Minister know when the first shipment of Canadian LNG will arrive in Europe?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
As my colleague, the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources just said, there is currently liquefied natural gas leaving Canada, hundreds of millions of dollars worth, that does what? Employs Canadians, that gives royalties to governments, that involves Indigenous participation, and that goes with the hundreds and billions of dollars of other major projects currently being constructed in Canada. We're building big, we're building with Canadians, and we're going to build Canada strong, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's deal in facts. Fact, the Prime Minister hasn't signed any new free trade deals. He signed empty, non-binding MOUs and burned taxpayer dollars to jet around the world for his chief export, hot air. Fact, Canadians need results, not illusions. They need tariffs dropped and the Prime Minister to keep his promise to protect Canadian jobs. Fact, Europeans have been pleading for a secure and stable source of energy. So while the Prime Minister is overseas, will he tell us when his new pipeline will deliver LNG to Europeans? Just the date.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, the member may have missed the news last week, Mr. Speaker, where $4 billion of capital from Enbridge, including over 10% Indigenous participation, will go to put shovels in the ground this summer on what? A natural gas pipeline, Mr. Speaker, that goes to what? An LNG plant, Mr. Speaker, that goes to where? World markets, Mr. Speaker, creating jobs and wealth and opportunity for Canadians all over this country, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Immigration bungled a simple decision to stop a known IRGC terrorist from entering our country. And Canadians still don't have clear evidence that he was actually stopped and turned back. There are reports, in fact, that say he actually just turned himself around and left the country. The Liberals are keeping the minister from answering questions because they're concerned about what she'll say next. Now, everyone is wondering why the Prime Minister is protecting the minister and not letting her answer questions. Can he tell Canadians, please, why she still has a job?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, ensuring the safety and security of Canadians is our top priority. I want to assure all Canadians that Canada has rigorous admissibility requirements, and we have been very clear that IRGC members and all senior Iranian officials are inadmissible to Canada. And if they're already in Canada, Mr. Speaker, they will go through a removals process expeditiously. We will continue to work with our border immigration and law enforcement agencies to ensure the safety and security of all Canadians.
Honourable Member for Richmond Hill South.
This Liberal immigration minister says she is, quote, accountable but not responsible for dropping the ball when letting terrorists into Canada. Letting in a known terrorist should have set off every alarm bell in this Liberal government. And yet, just last week, the visitor permit of an Iranian regime-linked individual was specifically exempted, and his entry into Canada was rubber-stamped under this Liberal minister's watch. A simple Google search could have stopped this. Worse, this Liberal Prime Minister is letting her keep her job. Does that mean the Prime Minister is responsible but not accountable for the failures of his Liberal immigration minister?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure all Canadians that no IRGC member was admitted into Canada, Mr. Speaker, and our government has been clear that IRGC members and all senior officials of the Iranian government are inadmissible to Canada. We have rigorous processes in place to ensure that anyone in the country that has ties to the IRGC go through a removals process. We will continue to work with our border immigration and law enforcement agencies to ensure the safety and security of all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Niagara South.
Mr. Speaker, the media panels have given up on this immigration minister. Bob Fife, the bureau chief of the Globe and Mail, called her performance pathetic and called her incompetent, twice in the same panel. Even CBC's David Cochrane said, when they fall back on privacy, process, and the passive voice, it's usually the sign of some trouble. Immigration is a serious issue, and the Prime Minister is ultimately accountable for her failures. When will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and fire this minister?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the love from the other side. I know they know that we are restoring control, balance, and sustainability and integrity to our immigration system. The facts show this. We have new express entry categories to grow our economy. We've strengthened our rural immigration pathways. We're facilitating work permits to researchers and PhD students. We've surpassed our Francophone immigration targets. We have just, the list can go on. We've 5,000 additional physicians to come to practice in Canada.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Wow, I didn't know we had express entry for terrorists. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that everyone has lost faith in this Minister of Immigration to oversee even the simplest parts of her job. This is the 7th Liberal immigration minister, and Conservatives knew from day one that she would make the mess worse. The media are now calling for this minister to be removed. Liberal MPs have called for this minister to be removed. This is now about the Prime Minister's own judgment. She says she meets with the Prime Minister every week. He seems oblivious to this mess that she has created. Will the Prime Minister end this national embarrassment and fire this immigration minister?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me continue with my list because I think I need a couple of hours for that. We're bringing our numbers down. We're strengthening oversight. We have an action plan that restores integrity to our immigration system. CBSA has removed 22,000 people last year from the country. Right. We brought in C-12, which they opposed in the beginning, but saw the light at the end. That will further give us additional security in the place. We have the foundation. I've also put in place the foundation of an exit tracking system that Canada needs in this country.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, today the minister said she would continue issuing tens of thousands of new foreign student permits in spite of millions of non-citizens being in Canada on expired or expiring permits, her admission that the Liberals have absolutely no way to track whether or not they've left, and fraud still running unchecked in her department, like they can't detect it. When asked what the Prime Minister thought of the failures in committee, the Minister claims she has weekly meetings with him and that she talks to him all the time. So that begs the question, does the Prime Minister actually think she's doing a good job?
The Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président, parlons.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the facts. If you compare the first 2 months of 2026 to the first 2 months of 2024, asylum claims are down 2/3. Arrivals of temporary residents are down over 70%. We are getting back the control over the system and the viability of the immigration system. The facts are improving, and Canadians can see that.
For Oakville West.
It was great to spend this weekend with firefighters. With winter ending, we are reminded of the risk of wildfires like the one at Bronte Provincial Park in 2021. And with warmer weather, we are already sadly seeing many communities impacted by flooding. As emergencies have become more frequent, more severe, and more costly, can the Minister of Emergency Management and Community Resilience let us know what work is ongoing to prepare for the upcoming wildfire and flooding seasons to keep Canadians safe?
Good question. Minister of Emergency Management and Community Resilience.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's Emergency Preparedness Week, and this year's theme is Be Prepared, Know Your Risks. Our government is showing leadership by strengthening our emergency preparedness and response capacity. We've increased our aerial firefighting capacity. We're improving federal emergency coordination through our new Government Operations Centre. And just this morning, I announced the renewal of the Humanitarian Workforce Program. We're ready and we're focused on keeping Canadians safe.
The Honourable Member for Langley Township, Fraser Heights.
The Prime Minister claims that his Liberal government protects private property rights and that they will appeal the Cowichan decision. But here's the problem. The Liberals dropped the argument at trial that private property rights come first, making it easier for the trial judge to conclude, and I quote, Aboriginal title is a prior and senior right to land, close quote. So how can the Prime Minister now argue say that they will argue on appeal the very opposite, that private property rights come first, when they didn't raise it at trial?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Private property rights are fundamental, and our government will always defend them. We disagree with the BC Supreme Court's ruling in the Cowichan case, and we appealed it back in September. Any agreement on Aboriginal title at the federal level has always and will always protect private property. The federal government has been signing agreements with First Nations since the 1970s. No agreement between the federal government and First Nations has ever led to Canadians losing their privately owned land. Our government will continue to advance reconciliation and protect the private property rights of Canadians.
There's a bit of commotion at the back of the House. The honourable members, I don't know what exactly is being said. I can't hear, but I do know that there is commotion. There is commotion when there really shouldn't be. Okay, I please, colleagues. Okay, are we ready? We're ready to get back to it? Okay. The Honourable Member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes. Colleagues, colleagues. Colleagues, we have to move on.
Consequences of dangerous.
We have to move on. The honourable member from Halliburton Kawartha Lakes has a question.
We want to hear it. Speaker, in 2018, the Liberals and the NDP in British Columbia made a deliberate decision to instruct their lawyers not to defend private property rights in the Cowichan case. Now, years later, that same case is before the courts on appeal, and the government finds itself unable to make the very argument that Canadian homeowners expect, that their private property rights come first. So how does the Prime Minister expect to win on appeal with an argument, the protection of private property rights within the city of Richmond, with an argument he isn't able to make?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, it's important that we correct the factual record. Since 2017, the federal government has been asking the court to notify private landowners of the case so they may participate. More recently, Mr. Speaker, we've decided to support the Montrose application, which is all about the rights of private property owners, which will allow them to potentially advance arguments that they were not able to make at trial. We are able to walk down the path of reconciliation and protect the rights of private property owners at the same time. Our next argument will be presented when we appeal the decision because we disagree with the Superior Courts. I hope all members in the House can move forward with the full appreciation of the federal government's position when it comes to the protection of property rights in British Columbia and across the country.
The honourable member for Similkameen, South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
The Cowichan decision has left many residents across our communities concerned about their private property rights. The Liberals are now talking about how they'll defend property rights in court, but they never made this argument in Cowichan before. Appeals are not do-overs. They can't raise new arguments they never argued before. So how will the government lawyers argue what Liberal MPs argue here when they didn't do so at trial?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Preserving the certainty and stability of private property is of utmost importance, and that is why we will advance all viable legal arguments to protect private property. We disagree with the BC Supreme Court's ruling, and that's why we appealed it back in September. We're fully committed to ensuring stability, certainty, and confidence for Canadians who own property while advancing reconciliation. We will continue to pursue this matter where it belongs, in the courts, not on the floor of the House of Commons.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, on November 21st, 1919, the iconic Golden Boy was hoisted atop the Manitoba Legislative Building, and it points north to signal the prosperity of the region. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Arctic and Northern Affairs update this House on the ways in which the federal government is allowing the region to realize that potential? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Northern and Arctic Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for that important question. Mr. Speaker, the Port of Churchill Plus is a transformative opportunity to connect Manitoba and Western Canadian exports to the world. While early stages mean more work is ahead, the federal government has invested $320 million since 2017, and we're also looking to invest another $150, as you know, to the Port of Churchill and the Hudson's Bay Rail Line. This is to grow northern trade. It will also invest in lowering costs for farmers. It'll stabilize supply chains and support good jobs. So this is how we're making Manitoba a global Arctic gateway once again.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
These Liberals have painted themselves into a corner, Mr. Speaker. They failed to negotiate a treaty with Cowichan tribes, so they got sued and lost in Richmond. Now the Prime Minister says he'll advance viable legal arguments to protect private property. But they told their lawyers not to argue the primacy of property rights at trial, and by now it must have dawned on them that an argument not advanced as trial is not viable on appeal, because the Minister just told us he's asking private property owners to do their work for them. And they talk about negotiation, but the failure to negotiate is how we got here in the first place. So what are they going to do, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. The Conservatives are creating uncertainty and fear. They are intentionally scaring Canadians, creating uncertainty for investors, and demonizing government. Our government has appealed, and we will continue to defend private property rights in Canada. Mr. Speaker, I'd remind the Conservatives...
Sorry. It's getting a little too noisy. We're getting a little too noisy. Let's take a short break, and then we'll allow the Minister to continue. This is a very important issue. This is a very important issue. The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I'd remind the Conservatives that real leadership means actually working to address problems, not fear-mongering for political gain. That's right. Real leadership is respecting the Constitution, respecting the courts, and respecting the work of advancing reconciliation.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Despite promises that have been made, people are struggling to make ends meet, especially in Montreal. In fact, according to the Institut de Recherche et d'Information Socio-Économique Research Institute, Montreal is the most expensive city in Quebec. For a family of 2 adults and 2 children in Montreal, a livable income is $88,800 after tax. A livable income means being able to meet basic needs with a little extra for unexpected expenses. That's all. But that's not the case for thousands of families. Instead of helping their billionaire friends, when will the Liberals finally take action to ensure that everyone can live with dignity?
Monsieur le Président.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, dental care, pharmacare, the school food program, enhancing old age security benefits. Mr. Speaker, the Canada Child Benefit is and will always be there for those who need it the most. And we will always be there for those who need help to make ends meet at the end of the month. The real question, Mr. Speaker, is when will all members in this House fully collaborate with us on that measure, because the Conservatives are always against it?
Being 3:09, we will now move to recorded divisions.